Ambassador Yamanouchi, thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with your first experience. Where were you when you heard about this triple disaster that at the time, did you know it was going to be as big as it became? Tell us about where you were.
As you know, I was with the Prime Minister's office at the time as an executive assistant to the Prime Minister for Foreign Affairs. Then we had the diet session at Upper House. But afternoon session, it was the domestic sort of issues. So I stayed at the Prime Minister's office waiting for the Prime Minister to come back. Then 2:46, suddenly it happened. Then I was watching the TV broadcasting of the session, and the literally was shaken at the Prime Minister at the National Diet. So immediately after that first shake, that session was suspended. The Prime Minister came back. Then we knew something extraordinary is happening. So immediately after the Prime Minister came back, the meeting started. Then all the reports and the things have been decided and to deal with the triple disasters. So that was a moment I never forget.
I think all of us that are friends of Japan, grew up in Japan, have experienced earthquakes before, but the triple disaster, the earthquake, the tsunami, and the meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi, did you know at the time? You said it was an extraordinary event. Did you know at that moment how significant this would become, or did you go right into kind of crisis mode of beginning to just work as hard to try to figure out how to help your country in this moment of crisis?
2:46, I just noticed this is a huge earthquake. Then the TV said this is somewhere in Tohoku area. But even in Tokyo, that big shake was something very special. Then immediately after that, tsunami. The meltdown, it's at midnight, we became to know that was happening. So, but I did not sleep first 48 hours, and I didn't go back to the home, like almost 2 weeks. So we had a facility at the Prime Minister's office. I stayed there. Yeah, something very special. And one memorable thing is the first telephone conversation between the Japanese Prime Minister and the U.S. President Obama, took place the same night.
So fast forwarding 10 years, you're now here as the ambassador in New York, working on U.S.-Japan relations. Having experienced it in the Prime Minister's office and now thinking about commemorating 10 years, there's something special about 10 years. You know, I think that once you get past 10 years, you have to then always remember the loss of the people, but also some of the beautiful moments that came from that. And I think in some ways, the U.S.-Japan relationship, as you just talked about, between the President and the Prime Minister, the first phone calls, how do we think about it in the context of U.S.-Japan relations today?
Looking back 10 years ago, then I just realized the true moment of the alliance and the friendship and partnership of U.S.-Japan was proven. So I just mentioned the first telephone conversation of the Prime Minister and the President the same night, but not just the Prime Minister and the President. Later you would talk of the actual collaboration between the U.S. forces and Japanese self-defense forces, and also all the friendships and support from the citizens, the New Yorkers and the many other cities of the United States showed us. So one phrase, a friend in need is friend indeed. That was a moment. So if I say the U.S.-Japan relations and the alliance is so solid, I think the most solid alliance in the world. But if you see the document, the Treaty of U.S.-Japan for Mutual Security, it's only 10 provisions, 10 articles, just one piece of paper. But what we did 10 years ago was a whole operation. It's amazing things. So that means the alliance is real.
I really appreciate the kind of friend in need as a friend indeed, because in some ways, even the name of the operation, Operation Tomodachi, meaning friends, it brings the U.S.-Japan alliance into perspective in a real concrete way.
Yeah, you just mentioned the whole operation's name. It's a code name, Operation Tomodachi. And it tells everything. And if my memory is correct, more than 24,500 soldiers were deployed to deal with these triple disasters, and 189 airplanes and also 24 ships, including aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan. At that moment of the earthquake, Ronald Reagan was in the different mission, but the mission was suspended. Immediately after that, the Ronald Reagan came to the Tohoku area. And also the amphibious assault ship Essex was deployed to help. So people remember that Sendai Airport was restored immediately after that, thanks to the US forces. And also the Operation Tomodachi includes a lot of search and rescue missions and transport of food and necessary personnel and essential the products and the goods. And also restoration and repair and reconstruction of the facilities and the lifelines. So that massive operation is a testimony of the true alliance, I think. And not only for the US-Japan relations in terms of the government or forces, but also we really see the friendship and support from the people, Japanese people, from the boys and girls up to the old people, love baseball. Same here in the United States. So after the earthquake, Bobby Valentine, he's a hero of Major League here and Pro-Yaku in Japan too. And he organized the exchange game between the ball team from New York and Tohoku. And he continued to exchange that. So baseball of young people exchange. And I think also it's amazing, amazing event. So Joshua, if I may, I brought one paintings. This is drawn by third graders of the elementary school in New York, Abital-san. And she came to the consulate to showing her friendship and support, and she brought this one. And if you see, this is a shake hands across the Pacific Ocean, Japan and the United States, third grader. And I talked to the staffers who worked that moment 10 years ago, and everybody of the Consul General's office was so impressed and moved by this painting. So therefore, they kept it as a symbol of friendship between New York and Japan.
Thank you. I think Avital represents the best of all of us. Speaking as the ambassador here in New York, New York has gone through tragedy before. This year commemorates 20 years since 9/11, and it coincides the same as this 10-year anniversary of 3/11. And obviously, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. What can you say about the New York community? You mentioned your colleagues at the time being moved by the generosity of New Yorkers and just the overwhelming support that Japan saw. I really appreciated your emphasis on not just government, but private sector. And of course, here at Japan Society, we also jumped into action and created the Japan Earthquake Relief Fund that we're very proud of and have talked about. But what is it about this relationship? What is it about the New York connection to Japan?
The first one was JAA, Japanese American Association, led by Gary Moriwaki at the time. He worked so hard. He gets the charities from New Yorkers, $1.4 million. That's an amazing amount, and JAA raised it. And ever after that, JAA still holds the foundation to foster and to expand friendship between Japan and New York. And that is one example. And second example is, do you know JET program, Japan Exchange Program? And New York chapter is the biggest one in the United States. So all the JET alumni work so hard to support this earthquake thing. And actually, 2 JET students or teachers from the United States, namely Taylor Anderson and Montgomery Dixon, were the victims. They were trying to help other people. Then they, very sadly, they lost their lives. And all those JET alumni worked so hard to support those things. Then I'm very proud to say this. New York chapter of JET alumni worked so hard, was very instrumental to put together all those resources and the friendship of the JET alumni. So that is a very special part of New York. And also, do you know JMSA, Japanese Medical Association of America, led by Dr. Honma and Dr. Yanagisawa. And they've been working all the time for this one, the exchange of the medical services between New York and Japan. And even after the earthquake, every year they do have the sort of exchange program between the families of victims of 3/11 and 9/11. They meet annually. They can communicate each other. They can heal each other. They can learn each other. So that's an amazing exchange program. And also this JMSA has been providing a scholarship for the Japanese medical student, especially from Fukushima. To be very honest with you, New York is the most advanced area of medical science. So the medical students from Fukushima have a great opportunity to learn things. But this is also the outcome of this cooperation in the case of this earthquake and tsunami. So these things has amazing, what can I say, ramification and lessons and opportunities for today and for the future. And people just remember, if a situation is very good, everybody can be very nice. But once you are in a very difficult situation, life and death, then you sort of show your truthfulness. And what we see the truthfulness of this moment of disaster, we just see it's a real friendship of the United States, not just a service.
So when you talk about the lessons for today, what today do you take as inspiration from what you learned on March 11th, what you experienced and saw, and many of the lessons that continue to stay with us through the exceptional work of our community at JAA or the Japanese Medical Association or the JET program or Japan Society? What do you think we should take with us as we commemorate and we remember both the victims but also this incredible resiliency that allows the U.S.-Japan alliance to look towards the future for the better days? What can we learn? Because we're in a dark time right now. I think all of us can admit that COVID-19 made 2020 and maybe even 2021 not the way we wished. We wish we could all be together physically, but this is a little bit different than years past. We can't do as much as we did. What can we learn from these dark moments that actually help create our character for the future?
Today, we are in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. And I saw the program of the Japanese medical doctors working in Tohoku area. And this person particularly worked in the middle of the disaster too. So he said the various lessons, the coordinations and the communications among the medical doctors and the local governments and central governments. And the communication is the key to address the most appropriate medical services to the people who need it. His experience in the 10 years ago disaster worked so well. They just utilized, they sort of actually implement the lessons they learned in the middle of this pandemic. And also, this is the 10th anniversary of the great disaster. I really, from my bottom of my heart, express my deepest gratitude to American friends, New Yorkers. You really helped us, not just in the materialistic things, but also in the heart, mind, friendship. It was so precious. Friend in need is a friend indeed. And second thing is, 10 years ago, we have come this far. We overcame many things, but still people are suffering. So I shouldn't say this is completed. Nothing is completed. But compared with 10 years ago, people have worked so hard to overcome the pains, loss, and many other things. The most difficult times, they're still struggling. But I think we are proud to show that we overcame this much in 10 years. So this is a good opportunity. And so in a sense, Tokyo Olympic Games and Paralympic Games is going to be a very good opportunity for the Japanese people entirely and Tohoku people particularly to show their recovery. So in the field of foreign policy 21st century, partly because of this climate change, the natural disaster has become one of the hot issues of the foreign policies, and the U.S. Japan has been leading the international community to come together to address those disasters, disaster management, disaster relief, and disaster prevention. I think the U.S. and Japan has been learning a lot of lessons from that one for the future.
One thing I really appreciate about you is you're such an optimist. It would be easy for somebody that almost was in a disaster themselves with a television falling on them, but you look at that as a moment of optimism for the future. I guess as we in the United States come out of a very difficult year and we have a new administration, and Japan has a new administration, what's your hope for the future for this year and for all of us in New York that care deeply about the U.S.-Japan relationship?
In the middle of the difficulties, it's easy to feel all the pains. But after the hurricane or after the storm, we'll see rainbows. So this moment will never continue forever. This moment will eventually finish. Then now we need to, and we can prepare for the next stage. And we can learn a lot of lessons. And when I look back 100 years ago, the world suffered from Spanish flu. But what happened after the Spanish flu for 2 years or 3 years pandemic? So in the United States, roaring 20s, all great development and flourish of cultures and businesses. So now we are suffering, we are in the bottom. But once this pandemic is over, I'm sure we will have great years to come.
Well, thank you so much for your time and just the way you continue to be a source of inspiration for all of us, but also the way you've highlighted other people's work. Thank you on behalf of Japan Society for the work you did 10 years ago at the Prime Minister's office, but you continue to do for our community today. And hopefully this will be a turning point, a lesson that we can all learn and never forget, but also remember the way that the U.S.-Japan relationship, friendship beyond just security, government to people, brings societies together. So thank you for your work as well.
Thank you very much.